Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Megan Judge. Guess what? Well, my guest is on, so she knows this already because I told her. So this is my 4-year anniversary today of my very first podcast with my very beautiful guest, Dr. Nadine Macaluso. And it just so happened, like, if this isn't like a weird full circle moment, like, and I don't even know how this really happened. We recorded the very first episode together 4 years ago. And Dr. Nay was my therapist. And now we're recording today, 4 years later, so we can catch up on all of the many, many things that have changed over the past 4 years. You've been on multiple times on the podcast, but I just really think, and I'm going to have you pipe in before we intro you, how like life just sends you the weirdest things. Don't you agree? Like that something like that would happen. And it was just by coincidence when we scheduled it. I didn't even realize it would fall on this exact date.
That's so insane.
I know.
But, that's just the way life is. I think if you like open up and surrender to life, it does show up for you like this. And I can't believe it's been 4 years.
I know. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Megan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
So Dr. Nadine Macaluso is known as Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street's ex-wife. She also is a therapist. She was my former therapist, and I'm going to toot your horn, pretty much the best therapist I've ever gone to. She's the author of Run Like Hell. She helps women and people break free from trauma bonds, and is an expert in trauma bonds and pathological people, and also specializes in complex PTSD, which is what I was diagnosed with. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back.
I'm going to take my glasses off because everyone knows how much I hate them. So it's been a while. It's been a minute.
No, it has been. It really has been.
You've had a lot of great things go on. You had your book come out. How long ago was Run Like Hell come out?
January 9th of this year.
So that was in January. So that's close to a year ago.
I know. Yep. I had my book launch party there.
In Manhattan Beach.
In Manhattan Beach. It was so great to see everybody. It was such a nice event.
Because you moved away. So you live in New York now. So we miss you.
Florida. I go between New York and Florida. I'm a real old snowbird now.
Okay. I love it. Okay. So I'm just going to give my listeners, since this has been 4 years, kind of the backstory. For all of you that are listening, you can go back. We've done, I think, like 4 episodes together over the years, maybe more, maybe 4 or 5. I'm almost at 200, believe it or not. And, right. I'm just going to kind of give the backstory of how you and I met, and then kind of go into your story. So in 2020, or actually like 2019, I came to you as a patient. And I don't like to focus on this story, but I'm just going to give the backstory for my listeners so they know. I was going through a really difficult time in my life. It was kind of a perfect storm, if you will, of everything from childhood. I went through a really bad friend breakup, and I went to Dr. Nay because I was at my wit's end, and somebody had recommended you to me. And I don't know, I walked in her office and I was like, I love this woman. She had like, everything was like Chanel, and like, you know, she had like the pink and the puffy pillows. I was like, I love this lady from the minute I met her. And, you know, she's beautiful on the outside, but beautiful on the inside. And honestly, I've been in and out of therapy my whole life. And like I've explained to my listeners in the past and to you, it's it's kind of like I immediately connected with you. And I immediately was able to say, like, this is what happened. And it felt like a safe space. So for all of you listening out there, I say this all the time. If you're in therapy and you're just like, it's kind of like online dating. Like I like to say, you don't just stick with the therapist that you're with if you're not feeling like you're getting anything out of it, or you're not learning, or you're not growing. So that's really important. Do you agree about that?
Yeah, what they say that actually it's not even the theory that the therapist studies, that it's really the relationship between the patient and the therapist that's the healing part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
Really is true.
So I think that's like how we met. And then I was in therapy with you for several years. And then one day I came to, or you would always say to me, like, Meghan, I was at the time was in a job that I was really unhappy in. I was just in the worst place of my life. Let's be real. And you said, you really need to do something creative, because I had been an actress. I talk a lot about that, and and a singer, and done all that stuff. And so then you were like, well, why don't you do something creative? And then I don't know, it was like a light bulb. I was like, I'm going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
And so with your encouragement and everything that you kind of like pushed me along to do, this little podcast started, and it's all because you encouraged me to do it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, nobody comes to therapy like whistling, right? Everybody's usually on their knees and feeling really bad. And, you were just ready for change. You were so ready for change, and you were open, and you were adaptive, and you were flexible, and you knew things had to change. And really just planted a little seed based upon what you had told me that you liked and what you were good at. And then but it was you who took that and ran with it.
Yeah.
And then you did it.
Yeah. And then like 4 years later, I'm still doing it, and we're still connected, which is great. So so that's the backstory, everyone. But what I would love to go into, because a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. I know I've seen it. In fact, it was on TV recently, and I was like, oh my God, did that really happen? Like, there's things in it that I was like, I can't believe she went through that. I totally forgot about this part. So we're going to talk about kind of your story and how you got to where you are today. And what I love about your story, and I say this all the time to listeners, and my listeners know this, just because I'm sitting here 4 years later and I'm not in therapy at the moment, everyone knows I still struggle. It's part of life. So Dr. Nay will tell you her story, but we all will continue to go through hard things in life. And it doesn't mean, if you're sitting here and you're like, I went through these horrific things, which you did, that everything's all like going to be roses, because that's just not what life is, right?
No, it's just not what life is. And, I think when I was a young girl and I was embarking on life, right, I thought everything was going to be roses. I thought that I had married my prince. I thought that, my knight in shining armor had come to save me, but actually quite the opposite was true. And, I was very young when I met my ex, Wolf of Wall Street, at 22, 23. And I met him as the movie shows. I went to that big party. It wasn't as big, but everybody was on Quaaludes. So I was like, what? But I didn't know that, because I didn't know what a Quaalude was. And I was like, what the hell is happening? And I left, because as the movie shows, somebody exposed themselves to me. And, as a young girl, I felt so much shame and embarrassment. So I left. But then I guess he had set his sights on me and really, really pursued me. And like a typical trauma bond, 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months later, we were married. And then I was trapped with a person that was highly volatile and really addicted to drugs. I was 24.
So in the movie, or obviously we're talking about real life, you were a model, and that was your background. So they obviously, like, you're a very beautiful woman to this day, but it was like, these men like target really pretty women. They target people like why do you think that I always wanted to ask you this and I don't think I have, why do you think you in particular, aside from being gorge, were targeted?
I think that for a person like my ex-husband, like I was a true trophy wife.
Yeah.
He had made it, he was successful, and I would be really great arm candy, I think, and I would be something that he could feel good about conquering. And, of course I didn't think like that back then, but I think that was a big piece of it. Like, okay, he made all the money, he had the first wife, he's like, okay, I'm done with you. Now I'm going to go to this next trophy wife to match like all this money that he had accumulated.
Mm-hmm.
Not that doesn't mean that there wasn't love there between us, because I think there was some of that there. But yeah, I think, and I was perfect prey because I'm nice and agreeable and so trusting, which is, is still
and so young, right?
So naive.
Yeah.
So yeah. And he was only 28. It's not like he was that much older than me, but still, I was a babe in the woods.
And do you ever think about like, cause I know you kind of had, a great mom and kind of a single parent situation. Do you ever think like connect those together? Cause I think a lot of women that I talk about that have been in these trauma bonds or gone through divorce or abusive situations, a lot of them come from homes that have had volatile situations or parents of divorce, that kind of thing. Do you ever connect those two things?
I do. I don't. And for me, it was different. I didn't grow up in a volatile home, but I think I certainly, my dad was a Disneyland dad who came like in and out, and he didn't warn me. Mm-hmm. Like he wasn't there to really protect and guide me and say, hey, listen, there are wolves in sheep's clothing out there. Like you're young, you're pretty, you got to watch this. It was more like everybody just threw me out to the wolves, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody warned me, and I wish they would have, kind of.
Well, I think that there's so much like thanks to people like you and like what you do with your life, helping people. There's so much education. We're so lucky now, and our daughters, like I know you have a daughter and she's married. My daughter's like 10 and 14. I think we're lucky to be in this situation and learn from people like you. So we know what to tell our kids and we know what to tell our daughters, right?
That's right. And, probably my mother had never even met somebody like that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I don't think she ran in like those circles or anything. No, we are very lucky that we can educate our daughters and tell them, there are people that will manipulate you and exploit you and use you in the name of love. And these are the things that you need to look out for. And it's never a fun conversation. Yeah. But it's important. And luckily, my daughter chose great. So far, so good.
Yeah. So let me ask you a few questions just for the listeners, because this is like going to be like an interesting part of the podcast. And maybe if you've seen the movie. So I think we've talked about this before on the episode, but just in case you're a new listener or you haven't listened to past episodes, the movie Wolf of Wall Street it's a very good movie. It's one of my favorites. And it's funny because before I had met you, I live in Manhattan Beach. You were living in Manhattan Beach when the movie came out. And I think I've told this story before that I looked you up, but it was before I knew years later I was going to come to you as my therapist. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, she lives here. That's so crazy. But there's things in the movie that I think you've discussed before on the podcast, but I would love to kind of pick your brain on a few of them. One of them is the scene in which, because I recently watched it, the best friend, what's his name? Now I'm blanking on Leonardo DiCaprio's best friend.
Yeah, Jonah Hill's
character, who was really his business partner, correct?
Yes.
So he choked in the kitchen and almost is that part true? I don't think I've asked you that.
That's not exactly true. So Jonah Hill's character was actually a mix of two degenerate individuals.
Oh.
His friend.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a business partner and a friend. But what had happened was once when we were renting a house in Star Island in Florida, one person that was around us who was one of these people had done so much drugs and then ate like a whole cheeseburger and then like did laps under the water and he didn't come up. And Jordan did really give him the Heimlich and resuscitate him and save his life.
Okay,
so
but
it wasn't.
So it is true.
It is true. It just didn't happen in the way that they did it, which is the funniest scene, honestly. It wasn't that much fun when it happens in real life. It was quite scary, but yeah, Jordan did save him.
And then what about, I think I've asked you this before as well, but the yacht scene, which is a very famous scene where you guys were out at sea and he was trying to get back because at that point okay.
In the movie, he's trying to get back, but really we were just going from Rome to Sardinia because we had sent the yacht there and the captain was like, there's going to be a squall, the seas are going to be crazy, but we were real, sea people at that point. So we said, oh, just go. And then we were in the middle of a huge squall for, I don't even know, 18 hours. It was terrifying. What happened was, we had a helicopter and a seaplane on the yacht, so they had to take those off, and then they rerouted the Intrepid. I'm pretty sure it was on its way to Africa, and then it came with a helicopter and sent a frogman down and hoisted us up. And then we went to the Intrepid and lived.
Okay, so I have to ask you, because that's got to be a moment in life where you're like, I think this might be the end.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was the end, for sure.
And what was that like, just having, because that's pretty much as scary as something can get, I think.
It's interesting. Traumas like this, right? You think that everybody's going to be scared and screaming and running around the yacht. But no, really what happened is the body starts to prepare to die. So everybody starts to get really quiet and shut down. And that's actually what happens. And I just had taped bedtime stories for my children before I left. And I was like, that's it. Thank God at least they have my voice. And that's what I thought.
Yeah, that is one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. Yeah. And do you have like dreams? Do you ever think about that?
I don't think about that part specifically. And I did, I've done so much therapy that I've written about it and I've talked about it. So I don't ever think about it, but I wouldn't want to do it again. For sure. It was horrible. I lost so much weight in like 18 hours because my metabolism was racing. It was a miracle that we lived. It was what happened is there's a rule of the sea, and then all the boats have to come and break the waves for you. And so I think that's what held us over till the Intrepid got there.
Oh, I never knew that. That's so interesting. What about, I'm going to ask you about one other scene that I thought was incredible in that movie. When he was on drugs, like heavily on Quaaludes, I'm assuming, and drove the car into the country club. Was that scene true?
Oh, yes, that's all true. Now, I wasn't with him. So again, like the movie shows, see, that's the thing about Quaaludes is when somebody takes them, but you don't necessarily know, and they don't hit right away, right? It's like a pill that takes time. So he left when I guess he was relatively sober. The Quaaludes hit him. Then he came home, and I didn't know he had crashed the car because he just came in, and I put him up to bed, and that's when the police came and were like, is your husband home? And I was like, yeah, he's sleeping. They're like, he was in an accident. I'm like, no, he wasn't. And then I came out and saw the car. So everything was like madness and crazy and just so much drama.
So, that's out of the movie. So these are all scenes and they're glamorized. But this was like something that I'm sure listeners are wondering. This is your real life, right? You're a real human being. You really did go through that stuff. He went to jail. You left him. You were in the movie, which, it's got to be really stressful to be going through all the things you went through, such a young mom, leaving a marriage like that, your husband going away to prison, all the things you went through. And
like that, it sounds horrible. Yes.
Yeah. But then pulling yourself out like you did and restarting on your own, which you did, but just to be kind of like re-victimized in the movie, like to be like, hey, I did all of this. By the time the movie came out, you were remarried to your lovely husband who I've met. And, you had this great life that you started on your own. But they re-victimized you. I'm assuming it was very hard to know that number one, a book was coming out. Number two, a giant movie is coming out.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Also, they didn't always portray you in the nicest way in the movie.
Yeah. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
And, first of all, he wrote a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to remember, like, I leave this guy. I moved to California with my children to start over. And I'm like, okay, good. We dealt with that. We're on to the next part of our lives. Hence, he moves to California. He writes a book. I have my own reaction to the book. I'm like, oh, I hate you. I can't believe you did this. I had my Mad Lucia moment. Then a few years later, as you say, the movie came out. And luckily, I've been in therapy my whole life. So I was always processing, right? So that helped a lot. And I had so many emotions. And then one day I was like, you know what, Nadine? You just got to surrender because this is bigger than you. I'm not going to sue Martin Scorsese and Paramount. I'm not going to make that my life's mission. And sometimes in life, I think we do just have to surrender to things we can't control. Mm-hmm. Still, I had no idea how the hell it was going to come out. And then I went and saw it with my current husband. I had a private screening of Paramount. And I looked at him afterwards. I said, not so bad. I mean, who knows how they could have portrayed me? I mean,
yeah. There was only like the one scene that I feel like, because I watched it recently, that I didn't remember, which was when they taped you all up with the cocaine. Was that? Do you know
that wasn't me. I think that was a different woman.
Oh, it was a different woman. Okay.
Yeah, no. Listen, it didn't portray me or the depth of my character or my experience at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was okay because, I never could have known. And I feel now I'm happy because I get to exploit that movie to help people everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, I couldn't do better if I tried. And I wish I could say I had some grand scheme. I had no plan. It's just the process of doing the footwork and then surrendering, right? Doing the footwork, showing up and surrendering. And that's all any of us can really do.
And that's a good point, because I think I'm going to circle back on my own story. So, I never wanted to go through the things I went through in 2019, 2020. I mean, it was like the perfect storm of hell. And,
yes.
I think now, if I never would have gone through all of that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I didn't even know what a podcast was when I started it. So, I was just in my bedroom, I had no idea. And I can relate to that because it's kind of and I say this a lot on the podcast, even the worst gifts, even the worst things that happen in our lives can be gifts down the road. And when I say that, did you want to go through all of that stuff?
No,
hell no. Yeah.
No. And I get that. And, I always say we don't want to have toxic positivity, right? Because if you're in it right now, you're screw that. Mm-hmm. But really, and I feel that for people who are listening, but the thing is that you really don't know where these horrible things are going to take you.
Yes.
And they can take you to good places. And I never thought that I'd be able. But see, Jordan is so silly in a way because, I didn't let them use my name because I didn't make money and I didn't have any creative input. And he looked at me, he said, but you're going to have $100 million campaign to do with whatever you want. And I was like, what the hell am I going to want to do with it?
Yeah.
But he planted that seed unbeknownst to him and I. And hence
because it wasn't till years later that you really came out. No? Yeah, it was years later.
The movie was 2013. I didn't really start to use the movie for my social media and for my book and to help women everywhere till 2019. Yeah. Really, 2020. Just, Yeah. So I didn't even make a comment about the movie when it came out. I just went along my business as a therapist. But then I saw all these beautiful, smart, kind, wonderful women being controlled, being betrayed, being abused. And I was like, in the 1950s? What the hell is happening? And then I went back to the research and I wanted to understand what was happening. And that's what made me write my book. And then it became my specialty.
Yeah, let's talk about that piece of it, because we kind of talked about the movie and it was really obviously really difficult for you to start over. So can you touch on so you ended up leaving the marriage. I could be skipping ahead, but I know he spent time in prison.
Yes.
And then you had full custody of both kids, or was it joint? How did that work?
We were very lucky because we had a very, amicable situation, because you have to remember he got arrested. So in a trauma bond, there's a power imbalance. He had all the power, but once he got arrested, I became his equal. And so he got arrested, but he didn't get sentenced for 5 or 6 years. And being the person that I am, as long as he was nice and decent, he had access to the kids. And they were mostly with me because school and, dentist and studying and soccer, that wasn't his forte, but he knew that. And so we spent a lot of holidays together. Yeah, we were able to raise the kids amicably.
And you learned how to kind of co-parent, even though you're probably, and answer this for me, I don't want to answer it for you, but you're still you're okay now. I mean, you're in an okay place. You have grown kids. They're both wonderful kids. And
we were able to do it.
Okay. So, but what I would love to know, because I'm sure I do a lot of episodes about women in dysfunctional relationships or divorce, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I would love to know the story of how you pulled yourself out, because you were living this amazing life that on paper, what young woman would not have wanted your life, right? Or you're physically beautiful. You could have anything you wanted. You were going on yachts with airplanes on them and, more money than God. And then you ended up leaving and then having to pick yourself up and totally start over on your own. So can you talk about that?
What happened was that once I left him, I went to a place called the Karen Foundation. And it's a rehab, but I didn't go for a rehab. They have a program there called Breakthrough, where you go for a week and you work from 6 a.m. till 11 at night. And I really worked on myself. And I didn't even know you could say no. I didn't know what a boundary was, because you have to remember this was over 20 years ago. And I just learned about myself and healthy relationships, because I was no matter what happens to me, I never want to go through that again, because it was so incredibly painful, my time with him. And so that with therapy gave me a foundation. And I had a little business. And I always say this to women, it's important to have something that's your own. I had a maternity business. And so I had a little business, I had a website, a catalog, and a store. I had done some work on myself. The government took everything, but I had a little bit of cash. And I was able to utilize it to live. And you know what? I was so happy to not be controlled and abused and dominated. I didn't care if I lived on McDonald's, honestly. It was such a crazy feeling. And then about 2 years later, I met my current husband, and I was able to keep my house up until then. And then I moved to LA and restarted. But it was scary and it was painful, but I had a therapist. I had good friends. And there were plenty of moments where literally I would fall on the floor hysterically crying. And what I do, I was I had 2 little kids. I had no choice but to get up every single day and put one foot in front of the other. And I had a lot of faith. And I had this saying that I used to walk around: faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain. And it just would mope around like that and say all these things to myself to get through. And then finally life got better, little by little, little by little.
I think that piece of it is so huge, because I have very close friends that are, I know women that are in marriages and they're afraid to leave. Or I have a very close friend that as well that was in a horrifically abusive relationship and, has really had to start over again. And it's a very scary place. And I'm very, very proud of her, because she's just one of the greatest women I know and a dear friend. But I think women need to hear that. It's not going to be easy. Nothing in life really is, it's grieving. There's so many hard things that we have to go through. I think it helps when you have kids because it puts everything into perspective.
Into perspective.
And you don't have a choice. Like you have to be here for your kids, right?
Yeah, I had no choice. And I just kept showing up to life every single day and giving myself space to feel terrible when I needed to collapse into bed, but then be like, okay, now you got to get up and you got to deal with this. And I mean, I was queen for a day with the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
I have very crazy, scary experiences happen. But again, I was in therapy. I had a lot of support and I just kept showing up and I just kept facing all those fears because they were very real.
What do you say? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what is you've written Run Like Hell, which is your book, which I've read and it's great. And I highly recommend it for women. I think, trauma bonds come in all different shapes and sizes and I think can be, with friends as well. But there's a lot of women out there that are in divorce, in situations where they're afraid to leave. What do you say to women out there? Like the first, most basic number one thing you can say to somebody if they've identified that they're in a trauma bond?
The first thing you have to do, like you say, is you have to recognize that you're in it and you have to admit to yourself that you're in it, that you're in an impossible situation that is never going to change and it's only going to get better if you leave. And you have to have radical acceptance around that and stop rationalizing and denying it. And I get it. It's so scary. But once you really admit that to yourself, when nobody's looking, it's just like, okay, I'm in a shitty situation and my life is going to stay terrible if I stay in this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to never tell them that you're going to leave them.
You never tell them that you're going to leave.
Never tell them.
Okay. Explain. I skipped ahead and I would love for you to give the actual definition of a trauma bond because I meant to ask that.
So, a trauma bond is a toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally connected people. Like you say, it could be between friends, it could be between parents and children, it could be between boss and employee, and it can be between lovers. So I write about it between lovers,
mm-hmm.
and it has two conditions. The first one that I mentioned, a power imbalance. Somebody has the power. For whatever reason, they have more resources, they're dominating over you, they're threatening you, or maybe just because you care about them, right? They have power. The second one is intermittent reinforcement, which means that 70% of the time they're cruel, they're controlling, they're manipulative, they're betraying, but 30% they're kind, generous, and helpful, and it's that 30% that keeps you hooked. And it just keeps going round and round and round. But the thing is that it's usually with a person that is not very nice.
So the majority of the time it's with somebody that's a narcissist and abusive. Yeah. Do you think mentally and physically or either?
Yeah. A lot of times it's not physical. Well, because once physical abuse became a crime,
mm-hmm.
now we have psychological abuse, gaslighting, manipulation, coercion, control, financial abuse, betrayal. It comes in many different forms. And it's tricky. Look at all the forms I named, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in it, you just start to realize that doesn't feel right. And you start to catch a partner in lies. But that often happens after you've already been in love and fallen in love, and now you feel trapped.
Yeah. What, my question is, because I think our justice system, and I'm going probably down a rabbit hole right now, but I do talk about this, and our justice system is not in place for women, and there's so much work to be done. What do you say? If you said, don't let them know that you're coming. Don't let them know that you're leaving.
Yeah, no.
But what about women that hear oh, I'm going to end up going to court and this monster is going to get my kids. And so women end up staying in these situations, these horrible situations out of fear. What do you tell women like that?
So what I do is I say, don't tell them what you're going to do. Behind the scenes, get a therapist, get educated, get my book, get a lawyer, get a divorce coach like Jackie Miller, right? Or another friend. So
mm-hmm.
set up a team and then understand your finances. A lot of women don't know their finances. If you don't have money, like every time you go to Target, get a gift card. Every time you go to Walmart, like you got to really think about these things. Get a secret bank account, get credit cards, get all your documents, get prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can tell them, or you can just serve them. I know people who have just, left in the night and then they wake up and they're with a note like, I'm gone, or you have your divorce attorney serve them. Or if they've been violent, I would get a restraining order first. I would just say, like, not let them be violent, but the next time they're violent, I have used this with many women, text your friend a code word and let them call the police.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a lot of skills and techniques that I tell them. And then, listen, they might not want to do it, and that's okay. I sit with them till they're ready.
So do you think that the majority of women that go through this are stuck and they stay in these situations? Some people, I'm sure, stay in these situations for the rest of their lives, especially like a certain generation. Yeah.
Right. Especially the older generation, right?
Yeah.
Also financial dependence, children, let's say you're physically ill. Right? I mean, there's a lot of things. So that's why I never shame anybody. Or if they... Listen, my therapist sat with me for 7 years. She probably wants to put a gun to her head.
Yeah.
Okay, listen,
yeah.
Same story. So I always say, I'm patient and I just sit there with them until they're ready to leave. I have women that come to me now that were married for 44 years, 31 years, just leaving.
They're just leaving now.
They're just leaving now.
And that must be really hard for women to go through, because they feel like they've like lost so much of their life, but there's always hope, right?
There's always hope. There's always hope. And you know what? And they're so, even though it's tough when they leave, they're happy when they leave. And it's more of like a constructive pain than a destructive pain. And they can do it.
So you feel like people just need to get everything in order, and that say they decide, okay, I'm staying in this situation. You stay in this situation, and when you're ready to go, you go.
What happens? The last straw will happen.
Do you feel like a lot of women are afraid to talk to their friends and family about this, that they hold their cards? Like, I'm going to bring up the Nicole Brown Simpson case, because I watched that documentary that was out recently. And and my heart goes out to that family. I can't imagine what that was like to lose their sister so horrifically. And obviously he was just the worst of the worst, O.J. Simpson. But what do you say to like women about like trusting friends or trusting people around you?
You have to, because the perpetrator always wants to isolate you. Right? Because they want to keep your world small, because what they want is power and control over you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want, right? That's why he went crazy, because she was talking to Ron, even though whatever, he was there to pick up sunglasses, right? But they want power and control over you. So you have to tell a family member, you have to tell a friend, because you also need somebody to say to you, hey, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And you need support. We can't do things alone in life. Right? Resilience isn't built in isolation. We need people around us. Like if you wouldn't have come to therapy and you would have just sat in your house.
Yeah.
This wouldn't have happened.
Oh, we're talking, by the way, for the listeners, we're talking about like my friend breakup. So I went through it with a friend. So I talk about that often. I mean, I try really to limit talking about it, because it's really hard still and toxic.
But I'm just saying, like, you reached out to a therapist like me, so you can change. Like, you can't grow or change in isolation. It's just not possible. So yes, reach out.
And, like I say this a lot too, that if you can find like one friend that you can truly trust, like there's a lot of women that, I am very selective about friends. Now I just am. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have childhood friends, college friends, high school friends, but my friends here, I really limit who I let in, because I've been burned, and that's okay. Right. Like it's better to have like a few friends that you can really trust and tell things to, and you can have a bunch of acquaintances and whatever. I'm not saying shut people out. But I just do think it's important, especially for women, if they find themselves in this situations, to find a therapist, number one, and also to find somebody that they can trust and talk to. It's like, I can't even tell you, my dear friend, and I'll say her name because I know she has given me permission, but my dear friend, Vicky, who's one of my best friends now, I met because of you, which is so insane. And we just went to dinner actually 2 nights ago. And like, I feel like I've known her my entire life. Like we just like tell each other everything. And she's been through a really hard time too. And so I think if you're listening to this and you're like, what do I do? There's always someone out there. There's always someone out there you can talk to. And then I'm going to ask you, so if you're somebody that's listening to this, you're in a situation of a trauma bond or a situation that you want to get out of, and you don't have the financial means, what do you tell people in those situations? I know you touch on it in the book.
Yeah, that's where I talk about, like going to Walmart and getting cards, right? Like there are little tricks that you have to do. And it is really challenging if you don't have financial means. But there are so many shelters. There's so much like if I have a support group, a trauma bond recovery group, it's $9.99 a month, right? And you can't believe when you're in this group, all the resources that you hear about from other women, right? And how they do it and how they make it. And then like they'll go to a shelter for a little bit and then they get a job and then they just slowly rebuild their lives. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but there are resources out there to go to and to not feel ashamed, because when you're in a trauma bond, you feel so much shame.
Yeah.
Shame for entering, for staying, for leaving, like anything you can imagine. But the shame should be on the abuser, not on you.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is so important. So if you're listening or you know somebody that's in a situation, something I want to add to that is, like, say you can't afford therapy, but the $9.99 seems like doable and really important because it's a support group. But say you're looking for a therapist. A lot of the universities and colleges, they're going, they have students that need to get a certain amount of hours. So there's ways to find help.
I was one of those. I had to do 3,000 hours at $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Find an intern in your state. There are ways to do it. You just have to ask. Like Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Okay, so I'm going to take a little pivot right now because I think I would love to pick your brain on a couple like current events out there right now. So we're hearing a lot in the news about the P. Diddy situation. I'm not as up to date on this. I haven't been like doing my research on it, but I would love to ask you about that and your thoughts on the whole situation.
Yeah, I just did a whole series on Kim Porter's alleged diary.
Mm-hmm. So Kim Porter was his ex-wife, I believe. Ex-partner. Okay.
Yes. But the thing about P. Diddy is, he's a prime example of a dark tetrad individual, meaning he's narcissistic, he's a psychopath, he's Machiavellian, which means he's highly manipulative, and then he's a sadist. I think he actually got joy out of humiliating these people. And so I think he's a real symbol of what's wrong with our culture, right? Okay, he as an individual alone, we could say is a true psychopath. He's bold, he's fearless, he's insensitive, he's callous. But who are all the people for 30 years that watched him do this to innocent victims? And so, because a person like this just cannot work alone. Right?
It reminds me of this is all too common, especially in Hollywood. It's such a corrupt, people, it stems from, I don't even really know where it stems. People are so obsessed with money and power that they're willing to sell their souls to do anything to be relevant in society. And, it happened with Harvey Weinstein. Why didn't we hear about this for years and years? And why weren't people coming forward? So now what's happening is people are starting to go, well, now, okay, so now it's safe and I'm going to save my own ass. So I'm going to come forward because I don't want to go down with him because now he's not going to be worth the billions of dollars that he's worth. So talk about that. Also, I would love to know what you think about Kim Porter. Like everyone's saying she died of pneumonia. Really? Like, what do you think on that?
She did not die of pneumonia.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean, no, she did die of pneumonia, but he killed her. I mean, that's what I believe, allegedly. But, you know, I got her book. It was released, I think, on September 26th. I bought it the next day. And then like 2 days later, it was pulled from Amazon.
No.
Can't get it anymore. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I spent about 12 hours reading it and then breaking it up into clips and doing videos about it to talk about their relationship as the as a quintessential trauma bond. But it's very sad, but she says that he must be stopped. She knew how evil he was. She's a prime example of, he groomed her, he wooed her, he won her over, and then he would abuse her and then beg for forgiveness and say he was sorry and then do something nice for her son. And then she'd go back. And there was just this constant battle with them of that. And he was very physically violent towards her. And then what happens at the end is that she knows that he has all of the tapes of him having all the sex with all the young men and women and the freak offs and everything else. She makes the mistake of telling him. So she tells him that she goes, the jig's up. You can't harm me anymore. Because with a person like this, you have to have leverage to get out.
Yeah.
So she has tapes as leverage. But she tells him, and she makes the mistake of telling him, she's like, you don't have power over me anymore. You touch me, I'm releasing these. But he knew that she had them, and she died of pneumonia. Her boyfriend died of pneumonia, and a producer that he was jealous of died of pneumonia.
Okay. First of all, people very rarely die of pneumonia in this day and age. No, but it's insane. Like when I read that, I was like, I don't even know if people die unless you're really old. That's a very odd thing to die of.
And I have it. And she says here, I'm going to die like Heavy D, like Biggie, like Pac, like so many others. And it's because he is a monster, plain and simple. Before hanging up, I simply say, that's not the only copy I don't want to curse.
Yeah.
Then I shoot out a group text. I'd let everyone know he got me. Then I call 911. As I sit here waiting for the ambulance, I'm writing this chapter and praying that I make it to the hospital. I don't feel like writing anymore. I may not be around to see it in print. It's okay. I'm sending it out. He won't get away with this. I'll have my final words. Sean Combs will get exposed, even if I lose my life doing it. My kids have always been my most cherished possessions. I want the world to know that, but more importantly, I want everybody to know. And so it's a small little.
Yeah. So how did they release the book? So her family did, or?
And this is all alleged, right?
Okay.
But she gave her diary to friends. And so they're the ones that put this together. But now all the powers that be pulled it down. Because there's a lot of celebrities in there. I don't focus on the celebrities and what I do in videos because I'm talking about trauma bonds. There's a lot of celebrities in there, I guess, that didn't want it out. I don't know who, but they literally got it taken down. But I don't know if it's her exact words, but it's certainly exactly what happened to her. And she knew.
And so she knew, but also like what's happening now, it seems, is they're threatening with this. I guess there's a recent lawsuit where all these like minors are coming forward, like young kids. They're talking about Justin Bieber allegedly. Yeah.
3,000 people have come forward.
3,000?
3,000.
Wow.
Yeah. It's right. And it's like, so again, yes, we know that people love power and greed and that people with power can exploit other people. But this is like, there were a lot of people witness to this and supporting this, as sick as that sounds. And, no moral compass.
No moral compass. But also what confuses me is like, this all was happening. And then the whole R. Kelly thing happened. in the music industry. And you would have thought that like something would have followed suit quickly thereafter. And this has been years later. So my question is like, is it all about money in life? Is it all about greed? Is it all about fame? I mean, there's so many things I just have so many questions about these people that they're willing to just turn the other cheek. It's eventually karma's going to come get you. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And, we're raised in a consumerist capitalist culture, right?
Yeah.
That teaches us that, money is the be all end all. I certainly know that after living my life, that really is not what matters in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, is it nice to have enough of it? Of course. But once you get to a certain point and that's all you become, because these guys are dopamine chasers. They want the next drug, the next girl, the next guy, the next album. It's never enough. It's never enough for them. And they have no moral compass. They feel entitled. They feel superior. And they'll use, harm, exploit, and betray anybody. And this guy, there's no words for how pathological he is. And I feel so sorry for the victims. And I think also like for the families, like there's a lot of young kids that are now traumatized going into their adulthood, or teenagers that were affected by this and too afraid to come forward, That's right. Because what's the thing? And this is circles back to why I wrote my book.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody believes victims.
No.
And even when I put the book up with my videos, right? Some people people say it's not true. And this is how I answer them very simply. I think Cassie taught us we have to start to believe victims. We have to stop stigmatizing the victim.
It's so true.
Can we just start to believe them? Well,
I think and we didn't talk about that. So Cassie was his ex-girlfriend. And if the listeners don't know, there was video evidence of this young, beautiful girl that dated him, I believe, after Kim Porter, who was an artist under his label, and his girlfriend. Yep. And there's a recent video in the last, I think, 6 months that shows him beating her, like physically attacking her and beating her in a hotel room. So I think that's when this all started to like unravel, right?
Correct. That's when it really started to unravel. And he denied it.
Yeah.
He denied it. That video. Well, she sued him, and then he settled with her the next day for $30 million, and then he denied that he abused her until the video came out, and then he made an apology.
Yeah, but isn't that so common? And that's what makes me sick about these men, most of all. It's also people that hide behind God. There's so much of that, like where they're like, I'm like, I've gone and done my penance and I've done this and I've done that. When at the end of the day, like, really have you? And the only reason, like you just said, that this ever is coming forward and people are finally believing her is because there's video evidence. Think about how many victims have been affected by him or in general in life that are victimized, and nobody believes you.
I know. No, she was very brave for what she did, and I really commend her and honor her, and I wanted to honor Kim's words because it's time that we really start to believe the victims. And again, that's why I wrote my book, because I wanted to take the stigma away from the victim, because we're always like, why did she stay? It's like, no, why does he do that?
Yeah,
why don't we ask that question
and also instead of re-victimizing, like nobody believed Cassie. Like people were like, no. In general in life, we just have to stop like re-victimizing people all the time. It's awful. So where can my listeners find you? I know that you're big on TikTok. And if you want to find out more about this whole, like this P. Diddy and Kim Porter book and all of your videos, where can they find you on TikTok?
Yeah, so the TikTok is Dr. Nay, NAELMFT. And then, of course, Instagram, The Real Dr. Nadine. And then my website has so many free resources, drnay.com, NAE. And then just get my book, Run Like Hell.
And where can they get your book? On your website?
On my website, get it on Amazon. A lot of people love the audiobook on Spotify or Google, or the ebook is like $9.99 on Amazon. So, and actually you can go to my website, I think too, and even get the first chapter is free.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really have to tell you, it's pretty, I say this a lot, and I'm going to add this point. In 2019, 2020, like part of my platform is suicide awareness, suicide prevention. I was in the worst place of my life. I'm still here. People that are suicidal or struggle with suicidal ideations are also not believed many times. And then when they end up taking their own lives, people go, well, why didn't we know? Well, if somebody's going to tell you, because not everybody shares like I do. It's usually the quiet person that you need to check on, the person that's pulling away from activities, check on your friends. I say this all the time. We're in a really, really hard place in the world right now. And there's people out there really, really struggling, whether it be, abuse, drug abuse, mental illness, all kinds of things, suicidal. We need to check on our friends. We need to take care of each other. So if I can leave everybody with that, just victimizing people in general is it's just not okay. And as a culture, we really need to stop. So Dr. Nay, I adore you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great.
Everyone, you matter. Your story matters. Keep going.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.